all-star panel here at the Engine Performance Expo. This time we're going to tackle something that I think is great, the race within racing, competition engine development lake. Another, look at this. Unbelievable. Mark, Ben, of course, Keith Dorton back. First time we've seen Keith today, of course, and Jon and George Bryce back with us. So just think of all the different styles of racing that we have got. Yeah. And something they have all in common is they have to race their competition in the development process if their bike or cars are going to win on the racetrack. Super exciting.
Like I said, everything. I mean, NASCAR, Bonneville, off-road, drag racing, 2 wheels, 4 wheels. I mean, everything, which is, again, all-star cast here. It's amazing brain power here. But, Ben actually has a class with this exact name, Competition Engine Development. And I love how you say this is not a blueprinting class.
Yeah, that's right.
On the description.
Yep.
Because talk a little bit about that mindset and why that's such a apropos disclaimer.
When we first started out, we thought, hey, we need to have a class about how to build engines, and so it was sort of like teaching all the basic fundamentals of engine building and all that. But what I realized later on was well, that's all well and good if I've got a factory service manual and I'm trying to put this thing back to stock. Mm-hmm. But what happens is when we go outside of that, we start building competition or racing engines. We're using totally different materials, totally different shapes and sizes, totally different, environment that we're running them in. And so, for example, you can't take an aftermarket 2618 piston mm-hmm. and follow the guidelines out of the factory service manual for a hyper-eutectic cast. You're going to have problems. And so I realized along the way that engine blueprinting really isn't the right word for what guys like this do, right? Mm-hmm. Engine development for me was okay, so you got to balance what you're doing and what you want to do, and then also how you're going to sell this, right? So I had to think about what is it somebody really wants to do? We're trying to take an engine that does X and we're trying to make it better. And so for all of us, the end goal is always better, and when you get it better, you just want it to be better. It never really stops. It's this iterative process of changing one thing, finding out if it liked that or didn't like that, and then sometimes you find out this didn't work, so I went away from it, but later on down the road I kind of circle back and try that again, and now it did work, and so engine development is this process, really, this mindset, this thought process of taking all the components and evaluating them, documenting what we have, making changes, testing and evaluation, and then starting over again. Well, to me, that was so much different than just how to build engines, right? Turn all the bolts to the right till they get tight. You're good. It'll run. That was sort of the engine building is so much different than engine development. Is how we ended up with this class. So it's a 3-day class that probably needs to be 3 months. Yeah. So we try to drink out of the fire hose and go as fast as you can and get as much packed in there. And I always get to the end of the class and go, I just didn't tell them enough. I didn't do a good enough job. And they walk away going, oh my gosh, it was too much, But I feel like I'm the youngest guy here, in this group of guys that are turning wrenches anyway, and probably the least qualified to talk about engine development in this group. But
he means that in a positive way.
I do. I mean, these guys are my peers. I guess it's unfair to call them that, but they're my friends. Every one of them we talk to on a pretty regular basis, and I ask them for help, and every once in a while they foolishly ask me for help. And I just feel like you guys have so much collective experience in years of developing engines is so much different than just building engines. Would anybody disagree with that? What do you think, Jon?
Well, I think you're right. It's just really you just learn by doing, and you learn by failure.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff we learn that we carry with us every day, that the things that you had that failed are the things that really stay with you, and you try not to do that again, and then you kind of go forward from that.
That was really frustrating for me for a while early on in my career, because I would always go to the legendary, the older guys. I hate to use that term, sorry, but you would
just you, Keith, on that, right? Look right at you and say, hey.
I went that way, Keith.
He's kind of running that in the ground, didn't he?
Yeah. I might have done that last year. I apologize. But what it was is, you would go and you say, okay, if you're a new guy in the industry, how do you do this? How do you learn that? Whatever. And the answer was always, well, you just kind of got to know, and you kind of got to get experience. And you go, well, how do I get experience unless you do it for 40 years? And so my class was, trying to bridge the gap between that theoretical classroom, college level, or even high school level auto shop, the fundamental side, and you're just going to, if you want to be in this industry a really long time, you're just going to have to be around for a really long time. And so somewhere in the middle, a guy's got to be able to break into our industry and have some level of success. And so what I tried to do was build a class that was a little bit math and science and a little bit experience, kind of a little country, a little rock and roll, but I depend on your guys' experience all the time and try to blend that with the math and the science. So my class was bridging the gap. How do you get from, I like building engines, but I want to build race engines and develop them, but I don't have 40 years. How do I get there? So that's what
I took from it, because I've been to it twice, is that it's the mindset. You give them lots of tools, right? That's one of the great things about the class is there's a lot of tools you walk away with of knowing how to approach and move forward that you probably weren't exposed to before. But to me, the real thing is it's how to think. Because I think that's one thing we've all heard each of you talk about it during Hidden Horsepower episodes or whatever, is that there's a thought process behind all of this that's beyond, well, the manual said to do this, and I did that. Because a lot of this stuff where it gets really good, there's no manual for it.
Yeah, we call it. I look at it as three different. You have engine assemblers, you have engine developers, and you have engine designers. They're three completely. I feel like I branched off into design a little bit, but my whole life I've been an engine developer. I take a part that's already done, and I try to just make every single part better and better and better. And then you have to know, okay, I'm going to work on a piston today. Well, that has a lot to do with rings. That has a lot to do with your rod. That has a lot to do with your cylinder wall. You have to look at the whole package the whole time you're developing that piston and know what you're changing that's going to change. Because one thing changes everything. I mean, we all know that. And I have a great example. One time we tested a camshaft. It was no good. We changed cylinder head, and all of a sudden that camshaft was better. It was like things don't always work every single time, but we just keep developing the same thing over and over and over again. On the NASCAR side, we have the same engines for the last 15 years, basically, between all of us.
Right.
I think the Ford's the youngest one at 13 years. Well, that's 13 years of beating on the same pieces and parts over and over and over again. We are developing it a lot of times over, and you just keep making that same lap over and over again. We're going to work on the bottom end this time, and we're going to work on the cylinder heads and camshafts this time. It just keeps going over and over.
It's a refinement process.
Yes,
George probably has the same experience. You worked on a very similar engine for a long time.
Every time you guys talk, it rings a bell for me, and I'm trying to remember how to tell you when it's my turn. But, starting with the same engine, say, 30 years ago, and it made 100 horsepower on a motorcycle, and then you go through it and develop it, and it takes a long time, and you get it up to 200 horsepower, and then you work on the same one again for lots more years, and it makes 300 horsepower, and in 2022, that same engine is up to 400 horsepower now. Basically the same rules, but we are allowed to put some more cubic inches to it and stuff like that. But learning that's rapid development. And if it was NASCAR, I would believe, this is my standing on the side as a fan, looks like they would put restrictors on you.
Oh, they do.
So if you're going to go from 100 horsepower to 400 horsepower, they're going to keep you where they want you.
They keep us where we want to, and the problem with that's where the money gets outrageous.
Yes, sir.
Because if you can't change cubic inch, and you can't change your cylinder head, you can't change this, then you're going looking for this coating, that coating, and every other stupid thing that you spend a lot. That NASCAR doesn't realize how much money they spend, how much stuff costs more to be engine developers when there's rules like they have rules.
So we used to say it was every time they put a zero after the decimal when they're trying to measure something, that adds zeros in front of the decimal to buy that part.
Yeah. So Keith and John, you guys are almost the opposite. You've worked on about every imaginable combination of, so your mindset may be different. How do you guys do that? Like, you got a different engine every time you walk into your shop every morning, it seems like.
Anymore, we're maybe grouping around the same stuff more than we used to, but but we worked on, 1-cylinder, 4-cylinder Nimbus motorcycles. We worked on some really crazy stuff for different people, and you almost take a little bit away from each thing you work on. That you see it was done different. Well, maybe that's better.
Did you have, I mean, I know you guys did, everybody here probably has, but, you know, we talked about this mindset, how it's really a mindset that's different than everybody else, but, like, do you think you were born with that mindset, or did somebody teach you that mindset, or was it some combination? Did you have a mentor that, like, said, you know, how did you end up being such an outside-the-box thinker?
I think that's probably just instinct. I mean, I don't think you really learn it.
You got it or you don't.
Yeah, I think from a young age, you kind of are probably really enamored by how things work.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter what it is.
100% agree with that statement.
Taking
Not
the lawnmower apart.
necessarily.
You're mechanically curious or you're
Yes.
not.
It wouldn't be necessarily engines. It's just when you're smaller, it might be, you know, how's this toy work, you know, or how's this wind-up thing work, or clock, or whatever. You just, and I think probably all of us here are about the same.
I was going to say that we weren't born superstars. We were born regular folks that probably got people made fun of us when we were growing up, and maybe, I don't know, I hadn't seen, you know, like a football superstar in here or something. People didn't make fun of him when he was in school, but I don't know if that's really a part of it. But I just wanted to be better. I wanted to win. When I was developing engines for racing full time as my day job, when we were sponsored by Team Winston at the time, my job every day was to find more horsepower. I had to go faster at the next race. I had to quantify their expenditures with results, and they wouldn't even let me sit out around. I got down in the country talked too hard one time about sitting out around because we were on the pole by a tenth, and we sat out the last round of qualifying, and they pulled me to the side and they said, "We pay you for that motorcycle to go up and down that racetrack, and if you park it, there better be something really wrong." And I learned, it was like going to school college for 4 years, learning that aspect of it. But when I started developing the engine, it grew on me in a way where I had to have more power in the next race. Going to the next race exactly the same, I never did it. That's good enough for the next race. No. I wanted to win more.
And I think that is an interesting, like, I don't know if it's a play on words, but competition racing engine development is like developing an engine that will be used in competition, or being in the competition of engine development, which, like, you guys go to the track and you put out a fifth place car and you got to go to work. And now there's another shop or two other shops or five other shops, especially when you got started, Keith, that you had to outrun them at the shop so you could outrun them on the track. How does that change the mentality? Not only do we need to develop something, we got to do it quickly.
Yeah, and two, like what Mark and I have done most of our career, we were more so than Mark because of what being said. But in that era when I really got started, we were competing against other builders. We were friends, but yet we were competing.
Keith, you were competing against your brother.
Well, no, not to start with, you know. Because
Later on, yes.
My brother was only like 10 years old when he started putting engines together. So he was helping me compete against the other guys. But you know, people had their drivers that they pulled for, but back in that era, they also, the fans had engine guys that they pulled for too. You know, it was Ford, Chevrolet, and it was...
Oh, yeah, Waddell and yourself and
Robert Yates.
Yates. They were just as known as the drivers.
Yes.
Y'all had T-shirts too, right?
Well,
Should have.
yeah, but they were dirty. they didn't have our names on them.
Probably needed to have engine builder fan T-shirts.
Well, you know, it was a private thing. You know, you know,
It's a matter of pride.
yeah,
Yes.
we didn't seek.
Right.
It wasn't an ego trip.
That's right.
It's
You were
just,
wanting to win, though.
We want to beat this guy. You know, and you know, John, what you said a lot. We've been successful occasionally in different ways, but like you said, I can remember the failures more than
Way
wins.
yes.
more.
100% there too.
They can play in your head
Oh yeah.
crystal clear, don't they?
Yeah,
That's because the loss teaches the value. Right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
You've seen on Yellowstone, when they're going to keep you, they brand you. Right? Well, that's the same thing. When we would burn up, blow up, and it would cost all the money we had, I got a brand from it. And it stuck with me for the rest of my life. not to go there again or do that. You know?
I tell the guys that come to our class all the time, I never learn anything on the days when I go, this thing should make this much power, and you put it on the dyno and it does that. Well, I didn't learn anything. I just confirmed what I already knew. It's when I say it should make this much power and you put it on the dyno and it doesn't,
right,
that now you dig in and you say, what did I miss? And that's when you learn stuff. So that it's the loss that teaches the value, you know, and you got to have a few of those to go forward.
And our support group, the people that are in here, and our friends that we would call, we needed advice. It was back when we were doing it. It was before any internet. There was no fax machine. There was no cell phone. I mean, we were in the woods, and we had to build something as best we could and dyno it and do whatever. And then we would load up and go all the way to California to see the results. Or we would load up and go to Indy to see the results. And because there was no communication like there is now, and it's such a beautiful thing now to be sitting next to Jon, and he and I have spent the day going over things we've done wrong and things we've learned. and that's such a wonderful opportunity we have at this expo to share that with everybody.
So, Joe, you bring a good question. I want to ask Jon this, if you don't mind. So, how much difference is there between you doing competition engine development for an engine that's going to go race, or doing an engine for an engine development competition, like, say, Engine Masters that you've done so well with? What's your difference in strategy there?
Really about the same, other than when those Engine Masters things we worked on, you were working at a huge RPM band, and so you were way below peak torque, and some of that was things that I had never done before. Like, whoever took a engine that was pretty racy and held it at 2,500 RPM, and it was trying to get it better at 2,500 RPM and 3,000, and everything's backwards down there. You know, so some of it was, I mean, the level of effort that went into it was about the same as anything else you'd work on. But
ain't that where engines idle at? 25, 20.
Well, the power,
That's good.
some of them started at 25, some of them started at 3,000, but you know, from 3 to about 4,500, there was all kinds of strange things happened, and it wasn't anything like you think. All the rules were backwards, and but you really did learn. You learned stuff from it.
There's a lot of things that you thought were going to work that didn't, probably. Huh?
Yes, but, you know, smaller ports. You know, the lower RPM. The biggest thing was header length, and there's always a spot somewhere that's really unhappy, like the manifold and the header lengths coincide to be exactly backwards. And you try and get that spot gone.
I think a couple of years ago, way back when we were still doing AETC stuff, somebody had asked you a question, and they said, like, of all the different things you could do in the engine, you know, what's the most important? I think you answered something along the lines of, like, you know, you can screw up a lot of things, but if you get that port right, you know, it's pretty forgiving, I think is how you put it.
As far as the race engine part,
Sure,
up higher RPM or peak torque to peak power, that port's pretty important.
But you get down below that, like you're talking about, and everything else really starts to matter.
Yeah, it's like port size doesn't mean anything. You know, below peak torque, so it's like bigger is almost better. It's stupid.
George loved hearing you say that, I'm sure.
I'm a fan. I never had one flow too much.
Says the guy with the giant valves.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like the idea too about what you're saying. Is, you know, we did with everything being backwards, learning from the bottom up. It's amazing how trying to make an engine work in a narrow power band like we do in racing. I mean, when you have 6 gears, you know, you want 1,000 RPM, 1,000 RPM, 1,000 RPM. So our range of tuning is so narrow that we just stay on the cam. And the stuff that's so much fun to learn about is what not to do, and the things you break and the things you burned up. And I say I have a vapor trail of 2618. A couple miles long behind me. I have burned up so much stuff in my day trying to learn how to do it. And we didn't have, like I said, we didn't have anybody to call, but I tell you, Jon's been a friend for a long time. I have a camshaft guy that's been my friend for a long time. I made great connections in the NASCAR community over my years that has really helped me out a lot. And we ended up with a good two-way street of information, you know, and if you can learn from somebody without blabbing everything you know about it to their competition or whoever it is now, especially today. I mean, all of our phones are listening to us right now, unless you got the thing turned off and the chips out of it.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's listening nowadays. But it was a great time to be in this industry and to learn. And now I love the way we get to share it, because at one time, when you guys were the best at the time, Nobody could learn anything.
We had no friends.
You couldn't tell a soul. No.
I mean, that's the truth. I mean,
You couldn't tell a soul.
No.
well, that's the thing I found so interesting about listening to that podcast driving up yesterday. And they were talking to Daniel Ricciardo about they had this big drivers dinner. All the Formula One drivers all had dinner together after the last race in Abu Dhabi. And they said the last time they had all got together was like 10 years before that.
Wow.
And they were said, because they don't do that.
Can't.
And they were saying some of the guys there, like Damon Hill, stuff like that would have never happened in the 90s or the 80s. No. They didn't want to talk to each other, nothing. But that's just the evolution of where we are now. That it's such a different. They said we can't figure out why. I can't tell you what's changed, but 10 years ago, this would have never happened.
I mean, I said that to you a few minutes ago, right? Like you've made your whole career out of keeping secrets. You're CIA guy.
100% honest. I've had conversations with my cylinder head guys at my shop, and I've had conversations with my block guys, and those two never talk because they know not to. The cylinder head guy doesn't know what our block guy. Not that we don't say it was just back in 2000 when everything was hard. You never talked. They never talked to each other because they didn't want to know in case they went to the bar that day and met one of their friends that worked at another shop. They just didn't want to know because they didn't want to be the guy that spilt it.
You were sharing a story earlier about how somebody left the company, so you changed the whole engine just to make sure they couldn't tell everybody what
exactly.
you were doing.
It's the same thing as changing the locks on the shop.
Yeah,
exactly.
You had to change everything.
Yeah.
Well, I always say I was lucky, right, working for him, is that as the oil guy, oil goes everywhere in the engines. I got to know a lot.
Yes.
But if you say, what about the cylinder header? I'm like, I don't have any clue.
Yeah.
I know where everywhere the oil goes. I know nothing else.
So what about the cylinder head? You're like, that's the one near the top, right?
Yeah, it's up there somewhere. Ask Rick Gurr, he knows.
When we were winning a lot in our day, that guy never went to the races. There was no way you could let that guy go to the races.
Right.
Yeah.
The cylinder head guy, you don't know who he is. He
Right.
lives in Georgia, and he lives down in this little town. They have 800 people live in this town, and he was really, really good at it, and he did it every day for years and years and years, but he'd never gotten to meet the public.
I would love to do
What part of Georgia?
Yeah. I would love to do a roundtable one day of all the gamesmanship that got played about trying to convince people what you had or didn't have.
Oh, my gosh.
When you're good, you want them to think you're not good. When you're not good, you want them to think you're amazing. Like that would make a good roundtable with some of these guys.
Well, I got a question for Keith, and for Mark. Going from the NASCAR background and then getting into all the other stuff that you've done, which is crazy, especially Bonneville, always kind of hangs in my head because Bonneville to me is just special. It's cool. What's that like, going from that NASCAR mentality to going out to Bonneville?
It was easy.
All right.
Because I got away from the having my hands cuffed behind my back with rules. So that was it was like backing up in time to gosh, I can do whatever I want to do. Cubic inches, no weight, blown fuel, naturally aspirated. That's all. Everything else is free game. So it was easy. I mean, we had so much restrictions, just like Mark does still, that it was unreal, and the stress was unbelievable because now, I mean, if they catch you wrong, they fine you $1 million and take away your firstborn child.
Right,
Yeah.
it's horrible. Yeah.
It used to be that, okay, a lot of people probably don't know it, but there's intake port height rule. They got these dowel pins, they put this plate up there. If you miss it, they used to slap your hand and say, hey, get that down.
Yeah.
If they could see it. Now they're measuring it, and if you're 5 thousandths over, our intake manifolds from the top of the plenum to the floor have to be within 5 thousandths.
I know. That's why I quit.
I can sit there 40 degrees and go to 110 and it changes 5 thousandths for a piece of aluminum. So
Do you
that's
realize
not
this
right.
is casting?
Yeah, it's a casting that you machine it. So we have to machine it at 2.5 thousandths at 70 degrees and hope to God that it's not 40 and hope it's not 110. I mean, it's like it's not near as fun as it used to be.
I can talk about this now since we're not involved, and Jeff will fuss at me about talking about it. But back in that era, the early NASCAR days, not in the 40s, but you know,
Yeah.
60s, 70s.
You did that for a while.
That you had so much fun going to tech
Oh yeah.
because you would give them some crumbs to hide the loaf of bread that's
Yeah.
sent back in.
Oh yeah.
And it worked, and
so true.
but it was a challenge not only to be fast and be there at the end, but also see how much you could get by
Yes.
with.
Example.
Well, here I got
Right, that's-
Example, okay,
Example.
port location. You know, we didn't have like now, I guess it's all based off Centerline. But, well, you remember, well, some of you might not remember, like the Ford, when Jack Roush and Wayne Gap did the Cleveland, they made these plates where they moved the exhaust ports up, you know, like 3/4 of an inch. And it really helped. And we ran it in NASCAR. They disallowed it. You know, they called it and they banned it. The cast iron heads back then. So I made an oven, you know, to do cast iron head welding. Got, you know, learned how to water cool torch, the whole deal. We moved that port, you know, 700 thousandths. They never caught it. They didn't have a way to measure. Now, did it scare me going
Heck
through
yeah.
deck? Oh yeah, it did.
Right.
But and the punishments wasn't as severe.
No,
back
back then the punishment. I mean, we originally we took 23-degree heads and rolled them over to 18-degree heads, welded them. Well, Jon Kaase is not here, but he was the Pontiac guy. Well, we were a Pontiac team. Well, he just made us 18-degree heads with the right part number on them. Sorry, John, but that was a whole lot easier. But
That's right.
But the head that he gave me one time that had the spark plug move, that was a little challenging because then it went through tech and went, whoa, you guys welded these up a lot. Yeah, we welded them up
did.
a lot. But there was no spark plug rule at the time, so we did it, and it was like, oh man, oh yeah. You guys really welded these up. Yeah, we welded these up all right. Thanks, John.
All right, so while we're going down that route,
Yes.
how about at the track sleight of hand? Because the other day I picked up a carburetor from Bill Pink to do my dad's engine, and Bill was telling Mitchell, who was doing the video stuff, about what a hooter was, because he didn't know, right? And he was thinking not the restaurant. We're talking about the ones for the spacers for the plates, and he was saying how they would actually do the sleight of hand when they were giving him the plates, putting them on, and all that kind of stuff.
Doesn't look like you know
Yeah,
what you're talking about.
I have to talk to Keith. I've never won a plate race, so I guess I didn't have hooters.
Well, I never beat the rules to win a plate race, but a guy asked me, he said, what can I do? You know, he at a short track where they put a restrictor plate on, and he kept asking me, he said, what can I do? And I said, I'll tell you what you can do. Hire David Copperfield. Because he can make that little plate disappear and a big one come in its place. And that's about as good as it gets, you know, there.
Yeah, I heard a story I won't give away that Mitchell videoed that somebody had gone to great lengths to make a plate that looked just like the plate they were handed to basically be David Copperfield and put on a different one.
Yeah.
But that's back before they started putting them on themselves, right?
Yep.
That was the whole idea was, okay,
That
in
is
the old
the
days.
reason they started putting them on themselves, to be fair. But I think all of this is, you know, the driver wins, holds up the trophy. Yeah, that's great. That's going to interest a lot of people. I think a lot of people are interested in this. Like, how do you circumvent the framework of rules that are presented to you? And, you know, as it's gotten bigger and tighter and those initials, and people are proud that that's my rule.
Yeah.
I did that. It's one of
Guy,
mine.
when we all die, the guy with the most rules is the winner.
So Larry Wallace said,
The guy with the most rules against him is the winner. So
That's it.
We had a rule where everybody had to weigh 600 pounds, bike and rider. And we found the littlest, tiniest little girl we could, and we had to put 50 pounds of ballast on. And there was no rule about where or how. So they made a place where you could put it. They made rules based on center line and wheelbase. But anyway, at the end, we ended up putting 3 vacuum pumps and 3 batteries on instead of lead. And of course, we were able to, with an electric vacuum pump and electric batteries, we were able to pull 25 inches of vacuum at the starting line and maintain it to the finish line with the electrics on. So they had a rules committee where everybody goes around and they would say, how many vacuum pumps you got? How many you got? How many you got? How many you got? When they got down to Cheryl, she said, I got 3. And they said, okay, well, change the rule for next year, that we can only have 1 vacuum pump next year. So I got a really big one. I got a big battery and I got a big motor, and I told the tech guy it was going to be a 3-phase, 10 horse, and I was going to put a 2-cylinder vacuum pump on it. But I didn't do that, but I did end up with the biggest vacuum pump and the biggest battery to take the place of the valves. But that was a good rule that got written about it.
That's good creative thinking right there.
Yeah, well,
Don't try to stop the racers. That is the moral of the story. Great job, guys.
Exactly.
Appreciate it. And maybe one day, like, we'll get the real secrets we'll put it behind the paywall or something, right? Like, you gotta pay for that one, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Ben and Lake, you guys are up next. Back to the engine to talk about something you know a little bit about: piston rings.
Oh yeah, so we're getting what are we doing now?
File fitting rings.
File fitting rings. I thought we just did that. Who knows?
well,
Whatever.
I don't know.
we're going
Next
to talk
video.
about something cool. I promise you.
And it'll probably be Ben and Lake. Next up, here we go. What a day, what a day, what a day. Yeah, my brain is swollen. I've learned so much today. They told us, don't start cars. We are not going to listen.